Let's speak to a bariatric surgeon who is having to operate on people who have had complications from people who've had weight loss surgery abroad. It's Professor Rishi Singhal, who is a professor of bariatric surgery, who works in both the NHS and the private sector as medical director of Healthier Weight, a private healthcare business specialising in weight loss surgery. Good morning to you, Rishi.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me here.
No, not at all. And, you know, I was watching you up on the screen and you were intently listening to Erin there. I mean, as a medical professional, what is your response to that story? I'm not asking you to comment on the clinic or what happened. I know that you can't. But just the loss of life, it would appear the needless loss of life of a 20-year-old woman.
It was very upsetting hearing this. We don't see these things in bariatric surgery. Bariatric surgery is a very safe operation. I mean, just to give you an example, we must have done around 20,000 operations in UK last year. There was not a single death following bariatric surgery in the UK. And you see this year on year. Maybe you'll have one death in 20,000 patients. But you don't expect a 20-year-old to die. Sometimes the deaths in bariatric surgery are 65, 70-year-olds who have a lot of medical problems. And they're complex cases. And you can sometimes see why something's happened. But it is impossible to accept the death of a 20-year-old who was fit and well, just having a routine bariatric operation. We carry these operations out, many of them in a day, and most patients are home the next day without any problems.
I mean, that is really interesting to hear, that it's not an inherently dangerous operation, you know, carried out in the proper way. You would absolutely expect somebody to come through it and thrive as a result. I mean, Morgan is a tragic case, one of a number we know of. I mean, Erin said there, and we have to be careful because to a certain extent we're hearing this third hand, but somebody from the Serbian authorities had told her that this was the third emergency landing in, you know, a very short period of time. Is this becoming a much bigger problem?
It has indeed. So if we go back 10 years ago in the NHS, when I was in the bariatric unit, which I still am in, we used to have one admission every 6 months of a patient who's had bariatric surgery abroad with a sort of a minor complication. A complication you can understand why it happened to an experienced surgeon. But in the last 10 years, this has changed. Now we are seeing one admission every couple of weeks. And the intensity of the admissions we are seeing in the NHS is much higher. So 10 years ago, you may have had a mild wound infection or some problems like that, or difficulty eating. And now you're seeing leaks or bleeds. So by leaks, I mean, when you do a sleeve gastrectomy or a bypass, you staple the stomach. But those staples haven't held through, and the stomach has opened up, and all the stomach contents are leaking on the inside. That's what you're starting to see these days. And these are not complications of chance. These are complications of inexperience, I think.
And is it possible for you to say what percentage of these more difficult complications that you're seeing are surgeries originally carried out outside the UK?
All of them.
All of them?
So all of them. We have around 40 to 50 bariatric units in the UK in NHS, and all units look after their own complications as a rule. So whenever we have an admission, it is usually from somebody, well, 99% of them are from somebody who's been operated abroad. One country or the other, 95% of them are from one country only, but they're all complications that have been operated on abroad. And there are complications that you can see, you can understand as a surgeon, that is this a complication of an experienced surgeon having a slightly bad day? Or is this an operation where you've got it all wrong? And sometimes you think that actually looking at the complication, looking at the management, that you've got it all wrong.
I mean, Morgan did, you know, get in touch with the NHS. She wanted to have her operation here in the UK. She had struggled with her weight all her life. It had been problematic for her, but she was accepted as a suitable patient, but it was going to be a 2-year waiting list. Do we also have to look at how we are serving morbidly obese people who would benefit from this surgery carried out properly, but we're not able to offer it?
Correct. The number of bariatric operations have dropped over the last 10 to 15 years that we performed the NHS. When I was a junior doctor, I did an audit myself, and we looked at probably around 15,000 operations 10, 15 years ago, dropping down to around 5,000 a couple of years ago. So rather than increasing the numbers of surgery, it has dropped in the NHS. But more importantly, we have to understand that 25% of the population of UK are either overweight or obese. So they need some kind of management for their obesity. And in a lot of cases, this is bariatric surgery. So almost a huge population of UK is eligible for bariatric surgery, but the NHS is not able to offer them that service in a timely fashion.
You know, which offers a really interesting other dimension to this conversation, doesn't it? Because, you know, your gut reaction, apologies, is to say, okay, these are these clinics abroad and the surgeons aren't qualified and they're not treating it seriously enough and the problem is abroad. But as you say, we know that we have a real issue with obesity in this country. We know that many people become desperate and for whatever reason they cannot follow the weight management courses that they might be given by their doctor. So it's no surprise, really, that so many of them are seeking help elsewhere.
I don't blame the patients for seeking help outside. I acknowledge the fact that in the NHS, there is a long waiting list, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, different numbers for different regions. And in the private, surgery is expensive. I mean, what I can say in the private sector, everybody is doing a very good job, and I've not seen complications like this. We don't see complications like this at all in the UK. Complications leading to mortality or death. So we are not seeing these, but I do accept that it is expensive and not everybody can afford that. So it is a catch-22 situation for the patients. That they have a long wait on the NHS and they can't afford the private surgery in the UK sometimes.
Yeah. A final question, if you don't mind, Rishi. You know, Erin, Morgan's mum, you know, she lost her 20-year-old three weeks ago, and I'm only repeating that just really to try and bring it home to people, how raw this is. She wants changes, she wants protections, you know, she's full of anger, she told me, and who wouldn't be? You know, she wants perhaps there to be some kind of process but whereby someone under the age of 25 would have to get parental consent or some kind of regulation, some kind of safety net. What would your suggestion be to try and minimize this rise that you are seeing in complications coming from surgery carried out abroad?
There needs to be an accreditation system. I've thought about this a lot for a long time. I feel very passionately about this. An accreditation system where the UK government decides which Turkish surgeons are, or which surgeons outside UK are meeting the minimal criteria that we have to meet as surgeons in the UK. I undergo an appraisal every year where my entire data, NHS data and private data, has to be disclosed transparently and it has to be analyzed. Something like this, any surgeon who wants to operate on British patients who works outside the UK, yes, they should help us out. But their data needs to be submitted to the UK regulators. It could be the Obesity Society or the GMC, and they need to have some sort of a green tick or an accreditation system whereby we can say that as much as we can see, this surgeon is safe. And that should be openly advertised on the web so that, say, patients know that these are safe surgeons or who have been accredited already by some kind of system in the UK. So they have a slightly easier chance at selection. I think it is naive of us to believe that we can stop medical tourism. That's not going to stop easily. We will need to make a lot of changes for that in the NHS, but we can try making it safer, and that's what we should try.
Professor, thank you so much. Professor Rishi Singhal there, who is a professor of bariatric surgery, who works in both the NHS and in the private sector.